won her battle.
I missed it too.
They only showed a very short snippet of her.
That's right, I can watch it on
I was a little
Xfinity.
But then she was on the 11 o'clock news, too. If you go on...
Times.
How are you, Mr. Brady?
I'm very good, Mr. Buckley. How are you?
That or,
Cindy, how are you?
We haven't heard anything, he said.
How are you doing? Thank you. Oh, I got a couple. Here's one for Deb. Here's an extra if you need one. I can give you one extra.
Excellent, sir. How are you?
Thank you.
Welcome. It's the March 26th Finance Committee meeting. We have Jack Buckley talking with the Massachusetts Community Preservation Act. Have you met everybody?
I have.
All right. And it's Article
All
11.
veterans on the committee, right?
Ooh.
Good.
Wow. You all right?
Thanks for the invitation. I thought we could briefly cover some of the highlights of the Community Preservation Act. I gave you a handout which shows how the implementation of the statute, how the statute is implemented. And it requires the adoption of town meeting and voters at the next regular election. So it doesn't call for a special election, it calls for a
Thank you.
election. Oh, you do. Okay. And you can adopt a surcharge of anywhere from 1% to 3%. The article has to call for 1.5%. I'm sure it can be amended on the floor, so anybody choose to do so. And it also, the article also includes the exemption for the first $100,000 of the value of each taxable parcel of residential property. And anyone who qualifies for low-income housing or lower moderate-income housing in the town would not have the surcharge imposed. There are a couple of examples there at 1.5%. Property assessed at $300,000. The average in the town, I believe, is around $286, something like that, the average property. This year's tax rate is $17.19 per thousand. On a property that's assessed at $300,000, you take away the exemption, and it comes out to $51.57 a year. On your quarterly tax bill, it would be $16 or so on your additional on your quarterly tax bill. And under the Chapter 44B, which is the CPA, the Community Preservation Act, all the exemptions and abatements that exist under Chapter 59 remain in effect. And Rick has been through this in Carver, so he knows how it operates. They have the Community Preservation Act in Carver. They accepted it a few years ago. And once should the town accept it, they would, by an ordinance or bylaw, set up a Community Preservation Committee, not less than 5, not more than 9. You should read the statute. It's very convoluted and interesting. And you would establish by the ordinance or bylaw the number 5 to 9, length of term, method of selection, appointment, elected, or combination. Most towns, I believe, appoint them. And the CPC would have to include a member of the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, Parks, as it's outlined there. And that committee would then make recommendations for what expenditures would come out of the trust fund to town meeting, and town meeting would act. And any time after the adoption, you may adjust the surcharge and not less than 1%, or after 5 years, revoke it. What I find interesting, there are now 148 communities eligible for distribution of funds from the Community Preservation Trust Fund. 18 communities in Plymouth County. In Plymouth County is those that have not adopted Abington, Rockland, Whitman, Brockton, East Bridgewater. I don't know what it is about that cluster of towns, but there they are. Dan, I got accused of putting something in the water in the Abington, Rockland water supply, but the other towns are Halifax, Hull, Lakeville, and Rochester. The latest to adopt was Hanson in 2008. Harbor adopted in 2006. And the second page, it just gives you the funding sources of the trust fund. It's funded by a $20 surcharge when any document or instrument is recorded at the registry of deeds, $10 for municipal lien certificate, nothing for a homestead document. And the money is distributed from that fund to the communities every November 15th. And this paragraph gives you the rate of reimbursement over the years. When it 2000, for the first 6 years, 2003 through 2007, there weren't as many communities participating. The real estate market was doing well, very well. The registry of deeds was collecting a lot of money, so there was communities were reimbursed at 100%. 2008 it went to 67, 2009 it went to 34, 2010 27, 2011 26, 2012 26, and 2013 was 52%. And the real estate market came back a little bit, but the reason it went to 52 was because the state legislature and its wisdom inserted an extra $25 million through the general appropriation process to the trust fund, so that they were able to raise the level of reimbursement last year to 52%. This year, they've come up with a preliminary estimate of 23%, which does not include any additional money for the state budget at this time. The state legislature very well added, as they did last year. Next paragraph. Each year, the Register of Deeds by the statute has to send out a notice to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. I don't know whether you get the copy of the letter every year or not, but at any rate, Selectmen get a copy. And it tells you how much is recorded in the registry from transactions in Abington. Last year, it happened to be $66,810 that Abington residents put into the trust fund. In comparison, Hanover paid $66,000 into the trust fund, and their distribution was $521,000. And the use of the money is dictated by the statute. The paragraphs, next three sentences, next three lines give you the use of it. The latest amendments were in 2012, which allowed a more broad use of the funds from the trust fund. You can capital improvement, maintenance, rehabilitation, some other changes. And the distribution is based on a formula based on the determination of your community preservation ranking. And if anybody wants to read that part of the statute, it's not quite as bad as the Chapter 70 formula, but pretty close to it. On the last page is just some sample communities over the course of the life of the Community Preservation Act in those communities. The local surcharge is the first number. The money they were reimbursed from the trust fund is the second number. The last column is the date that it was adopted in that community. You can look at a town like Marshall. The ones with the larger numbers are the ones that are adopted a 3% surcharge. But Randolph and Weymouth and other communities, but as I said, in Plymouth County alone are 18 18 separate communities that have adopted it. I think Duxbury's numbers, I think in total are a $22 million range from the surcharge they adopted and the money they collected from the trust fund. And those are some of the uses of the funds in some selected communities. You can, in Abington, some of these programs that are listed there are programs that could have been utilized from money from the trust fund, and that's where we are. The the websites that I listed at the bottom, the communitypreservation.org, has a number of different projects that have been funded across the Commonwealth. One of the ones I looked at and was found interesting was in Nantucket, because of the high cost of housing, it is hard for them to attract teachers down there, so they put some money from their CPA fund into housing for teachers. So it was an interesting use of their funds. There's been a lot of housing projects that have been funded, and as I said, if you go on that first website, you can look at all of the different kinds of projects that have been funded. Second website is the Department of Revenue. It lists all of the distributions over the number of years, the number of the individual communities that exist. The Secretary of State's website has the way you adopt the statute, the ramifications of adoption, and also have other interesting items. The Mass Legislature website has the statute on their website and the amendments that have been made to it, particularly those that were made in 2012. So those are good websites. They're interesting websites, and I filed a petition because I think that since the year 2000, when it was enacted, it might be nice if we had a conversation in Abington about the adoption of the CPA. There aren't very many places where you can invest money now and get a minimum over the years of a 22 to 23% return. You get, I think Leo Provo, when he has surplus funds now, is lucky to get 1% on his return on his investments. I think a few years ago he was getting $300,000 in interest income. Now he's down around $50,000 or $60,000 maybe in interest income from the funds that are available. But those communities that have adopted it have funded some great projects. It makes no sense to me to have people in Abington pay the money out to a trust fund for which they see absolutely no return. The money goes elsewhere across the Commonwealth. But a subject certainly worthy of discussion. It was just months ago, my friend and chairman of Selectmen and Tom Dion tried to put together a study committee, and for whatever reason, couldn't get the approval of the rest of the board of selectmen to even set up a committee to look into it. So here you are. That's my case, and I'll stand by it.
A couple questions.
Sure. I can't answer Rickman.
I bet you can answer. So the paying in, so you said the people in Abington are paying in, it's only when there's those real estate transactions.
Right.
Okay. Do you know what the total per year would be? So
That total for last year was 66,000.
for the surcharge?
No, what would the total of the surcharge be?
Yeah, so
No, I wouldn't
in
know.
year one,
Yeah.
okay.
What would the town raise?
Yeah.
I can find that out from the assessor and let you know, sure.
Thank you.
I assume, I'll give you one at 1.5%, one at 3%, and take it into consideration, assuming that the adoption of the $100,000 exemption is in place too. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Buckley,
Yes, sure.
actually, I think I've sat through a handful of times that we've talked about this. Interestingly enough, I've actually changed my mind over time. As it looks, it just, one of the sources that you had cited, communitypreservation.org, is a fairly robust website. It does offer, it's a robust website and offers a lot of good data.
Yep.
So spending some time there, I happen to notice that, just as a minor technical point, we had a handful of communities pass it in 2011, 12, and 13. So you see more communities jumping on board, 155 out of 351 to be exact. I would say the nearly juxtaposed city of Quincy recently in 2013 passed it, but one thing that becomes of interest to me are a couple of components, right? So the way the statute was enabled, it gave the legislative body, us being the town meeting, the options to accept certain provisions. So as you mentioned, the first $100,000 was accepted, or at least put forth in your article. What I did notice is 80% of the communities that did enact it put a low-income exception, which is equally.
That's in there too.
Was it in there? Perfect.
Yeah, it's one of the exemptions that would be would
So,
be
so,
included.
thank you.
Yeah, after exempting from the surcharge, property owner and operator is a domicile beyond a person who qualifies for low-income housing or low or moderate
The-
income. Yeah.
The next, this is more of a, I suppose, a technical question. I'll ask Rick, because you went through this in Carver. And it looks like Carver did a ballot initiative versus town meeting.
Yes.
So I also noticed that, interestingly enough, a third of the communities had opted to go for ballot to give, I don't know if Carver was a representative town meeting or if it was an open town meeting.
That's one of the options in the law. You can, by petition, if you get 5% of the registered voters in the community, you can bypass town meeting or directly to the ballot.
I think the clear druthers would be to keep this within town meeting, but I just wonder why ballot versus town meeting.
Why?
It's a simple matter, a practical matter of whether or not you think you can get the votes at a town meeting. There was a tremendously broad appeal, at least in Carver, for several projects. But getting a lot of the proponents of those projects to the town meeting necessarily.
My phlegm gave me a compensatory pause, but the actual true basis of my question was on issue of taxation. I wonder if it should be part of a ballot initiative compared to town meeting. That's really what the basis
Well, it goes to
of
the
my question.
ballot
Good
anyway.
question.
Say it again?
It goes to the ballot.
Regardless. Regardless, it goes to town meeting says yes, then it finally goes to the ballot versus just going straight to the ballot, which bypasses town meeting.
Correct. Correct. So the only question is whether or not it goes to town meeting, not whether it goes to the ballot.
Got it.
That is a cast in stone, correct.
I think that the root of town meeting is an opportunity for the participants in town meeting, those who watch on cable, to get information and knowledge on, where if you go directly to the ballot, then it's a different kind of a campaign.
So the only true, this is more of an editorial, the only downside to doing it, frankly, is greater discussion on it. I think that frankly, every real estate transaction that happens, there is an opportunity to reinvest in the community, and there's an opportunity that doesn't get dispersed amongst the existing base that's here. So to that end, I think that any further consideration should be saying, yes, we should agree to this particular warrant article, and it makes perfect sense for the community.
Well, I tell you, it would be obviously a great advantage to have the finance committee support it, but it's a tough slog when you don't have all of the elected officials on board. When you get a board of selectmen that won't even look at a study, it makes it
Did they
a
give
tough
a,
call.
did they give a reason as to why they?
The reason ostensibly was, well, you'd have to have a balanced committee, and you can always raise it without a committee, and it made no sense to me. But a lot of things they do make no sense to me, so what can I tell you?
Cindy?
I think I watched that meeting too, and I think part of the reason that they were a little bit leery about it at this time was the fact that they were concerned with the people looking at the new school as well, that the taxes would be going up. If they vote the new school, you get a tax increase of between $450 and $600, then a surcharge on top of that. And I know that, just looking today online just quickly, Abington already is in the top 1/3 of the state for the highest taxes. So, I think that was one of the reasons. I think Selectman Burbine might have pointed that out as well. He was kind of, that was one of the things that.
Issue, but what bothers me is about it more than even that discussion, was that this law has been on the books since the year 2000. We've had no rational discussion, or irrational discussion, for that matter.
True.
And you're touching on what my pain with it is, just.
Yeah, that just seemed kind of be like one of the rationales, that there were several of the selectmen that brought that up.
Could I raise a couple points? And I
Absolutely.
hesitate to do this.
Oh, please do.
Because this is a classic, tax and spend, issue, political issue, which I like to try to stay out of. However, there are some principles involved here. Number one is that the Abington residents are already paying for this. Your money is going elsewhere. That's just the reality of it. The other very practical component is that there are projects in this town that have and are being funded and could be significantly offset by CPA funds, and the projects that are already happening, money that could be utilized from the program to offset what the taxpayers in this town are paying for those projects right now. So there really is a Yes, it's a tax and spend issue, but I think you have to look at the benefits to this program for the taxpayer are also significant. It's not just paying, it's not just coming out of it. So, but I would agree with you, Cindy. I think the concern, I feel obligated to defend the honor of my board. Sorry, Mr. Buckley. But I think that really is the issue, is the concerns about, I think, I hate to speak for them all individually, but I think almost to a person, they see the school project as the #1 priority right now in terms of a spending issue. And I think there's some concern about things that may compromise that any further. So I think that's really the issue, I know. But as to having good, solid discussions about the CPA, that's for all of you to decide.
It's, Rick and I were speaking before, this is one of the better grant programs the state has ever come up with. I mean, when you get a minimum return over the years so far of 20 cents on the dollar, it's a pretty good return. And last year, as I said, it went up to 52% because of the infusion of the $25 million in the state budget. So, but it's a program that, as Rick said, could have been used. It could have freed up the money that was used for other purposes in the towns. And if the average was $16 a quarter on your quarterly tax bill, something to consider. And that's at the 1.5% rate.
Just a comment, I'd love to see a committee put together that can look at, instead of leaving money on the table like that. I understand right now the school being definitely the main focus, but I'd love to see a committee look into where this type of grant could offset some of the costs of things that we'll be looking at in the future. And, you know, how much money can we save? Like you were saying, some of the projects that we're already doing could have been offset by this. Like, I'd like to see, you know, stuff looking forward, how we could get the most bang for our buck, I guess.
I don't think any of these school is the highest priority in the town right now. It's an issue that will be upon us in the fall and early next year. So
It's definitely the biggest issue that's being talked about, I think, right now, as far as hot topics go.
And I think for the purposes of town meeting, a town meeting vote gets it to the broader audience of the ballot. Doesn't enact it, so to speak. So I think there's two questions. Number one is, you know, do you support putting it in front of the public broadly in a ballot vote, even if you may not individually think it's a great idea right now? It's one of those philosophical questions. Do you give the people the right to vote as you may deem that the right to vote, or do you think town meeting should be in a position of making the decision for the broader electorate? I don't have an answer to that. That's a philosophical question.
Right.
I've heard 5 different sides of that. I think there's only 2 different sides. So that's a question that you'll have to wrestle with, not me.
Thank you.
I'm only here to bring you problems, not solutions.
Thank you.
I'll get you that information. And as to what the total yield will be on both on 1.5% and on 5%, assuming there's a $100,000 exemption.
Do you want to email? Or you want to email?
Sure.
Okay, then I'll email it out to everybody.
Yep, fine.
Okay, I'll send you an email with my info.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Buckley.
Thanks, Jack.
Next is continued business. We talked about it a little bit last week.
Yes, we did.
Last we talked, I think you were planning to have discussions at the end of the week.
When will you, I feel I'll be in a position really next week to provide a preliminary budget proposal. I don't know if it's, one of my concerns is next, following week is difficult for me fee schedule wise to have some confirmation responsibilities. I need to deal with 2 nights that week of the 7th, so I can get you something probably by the end of next week, but I don't think I'll be able to be available to discuss it the week of the 7th. So I don't know, I'll do whatever you want, but I just want to make sure that, I don't know what your plan was for a meeting schedule, and I don't want to dictate your meeting either, so.
Maybe we meet next week and start tackling some of the warrant articles. Do you want to distribute that next week, and then we take a week off and dig through it and come back with 100 questions?
That sounds like a good
Okay.
plan. So next Wednesday night again?
Yeah, we'll meet Wednesday and we'll just start with the warrant.
Yes.
Can you back us into when our recommendations are?
They're like way out because it's in June.
Okay, so,
I don't know them off the top of my head, so it would be mid-May.
Yeah, we'll have to count the calendar.
So this will give us
Make a point to do that for you.
all of April.
Not that the finance committee can't count.
so what are we doing with April town meeting then?
It's been rescheduled.
Okay, so we
It's-
don't have to go
My
and
understanding is we don't
reschedule?
need anything, nobody's meeting in April. Nobody's going to push it out, it's just pushed out to June.
Okay,
Yes.
June
it's just been
Right.
changed.
Yep.
There's no reason to convene it and then continue it.
Okay, because other years we've had to have it and then,
Right, I believe last year's model was you pushed off the annual, met for the special, didn't get a quorum, and then scheduled the special for the annual anyways.
right,
That's what we're trying to avoid.
right. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
So we can talk next week then. We'll have some ideas on when we need to get
Okay,
everything
yeah,
done by.
that, I'm much
Yeah.
more comfortable thinking.
Yeah, it's not
that's in June.
April.
I'm thinking,
It's
you know,
June.
if we take a week off.
We can meet the
I was
week
a little
after.
nervous.
I think a week off would be nice.
I'm
We'll
all for
have
that.
homework to do during that week.
Absolutely.
Moving on, liaison reports. Do you have anything else?
I just also
Oh.
want, I don't know if anybody was going to mention this, maybe you or Mr. Chairman, that the town did get today approval from MSBA to move forward with its conceptual design of the project as proposed has been approved to move to the next step. So that's a huge hurdle in the school building project. And if you don't have an email yet, you'll be getting one within a day or so. You might already have one sitting on your computer, so.
2 people don't have it because their email, someone didn't know their email addresses, so they will get it forward tonight.
Yeah.
All right. Liaison reports. Review of minutes. We have 1 minutes from March 19th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of March 19th.
Second?
All those in, is everybody here? Barbara wasn't.
I'm,
All those in favor? Opposed? Great. Correspondence? Anyone? I didn't check. Great. Does anyone have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
second?
All those in favor? Opposed?
Probably was sitting there ready.
I got Carter trying to call. No, I'm in a meeting.